obviously this is about the young thing, like YouTube and things. So you don't want a slightly chubby, furry 52-year-old doing this. So please, round of applause for our MA student, Megan. And a massive round of applause, Jordan Schwarzenberger.
Hello.
So, hi there, Jordan. I'm Megan, so I'll be interviewing you today. We've got a few questions for you, but we'll just have a bit of fun with it. So, after joining Vice as their youngest ever creative at 18 years old to starting your own online content management company, which is obviously Arcade, what was your route into industry? What did that look like, and how did those opportunities come along?
Yeah, well, firstly, hello everybody. This is kind of, I've never done one of these before, where it's all virtual. It's all very smooth and it's looking great. So I hope you're all good. Yeah. So how did I get into the industry? So I think for me, it was a bit of a weird one because I didn't really know what the industry was. I think most people, when they're at school and they start to kind of get to that point where they're finishing, they don't really know what's coming, right? Which is why, highly, I guess, tangible courses like the one that you guys are doing help because it can give you a bit of a bridge. But most people don't even really know what the industry is or how it makes money or what the roles actually pay or a commercial are, etc. So when I was at the end of school, I basically remember just looking around at all the different companies that I could sort of think of, and Vice was the one company that I thought of that was cool and relevant. Obviously, RIP today, they're pretty much dead and buried, bless them. But at the time, they were really relevant. And so, yeah, I guess it was from thinking about the company and then looking on their website, finding a role of a creative, which to me at the time sounded amazing and super fun. And like, oh, you just come up with ideas all day, great, like I'm in. To then basically trying to track down a bunch of email addresses, emailing everybody there. And 2 people got back. And I now know, obviously, being in offices, like what that must have been like, some like 18-year-old kid, 17 even at the time, like messaging everybody, getting ping all at once, but like, who the hell is this guy? What's he doing? Get out. Which is funny now thinking about it, but it worked, right? And 2 people got back. And then from then I was able to get work experience by just asking, like saying, hey, like I love what you guys do, obviously. I'm into creativity, whatever that means. Can I come and spend some time with you? And I think if you show a bit of willingness and your attitude's right and you go for it and you sort of ask the question that no one else asks, then it can happen, and more people are receptive than you might think. So that's kind of how it happened. And then from there, it was snowballing into
Can you hear us, Jordan, at all? Because I think we've lost you.
I can hear you now. I can.
Oh, right.
Sorry.
I think you've come
I said I cursed this thing. I said it was all smooth and it was all going well, and then bang, there we go. Bound to happen. But you're back now. You're back now.
If you just want to, I think we lost you at the part where you started talking about you've gone through Vice and things like that, and now you're creating your own management company.
Yeah. So sorry. Yeah. So just how I fell into the sort of creative agency side of Vice, which is the bit that works with brands, and then from there to then publishers like Lab Bible, to then fully into the world of talent, which is probably another story for maybe another question. But yeah, it was falling into really more than anything else.
All right, that's really interesting. And just out of curiosity as well, what do you think made you stand out to those employers when you were reaching out? Why did they respond to your emails?
I think main thing was that I sent it with an attitude that was, I guess, quite passionate and was, really willing to try, and wasn't expecting to be paid a big salary or anything. I was just literally there going, right, can I come and learn from you? And I think that goes down quite well. And then the other thing was just, while I was at school, I spent a lot of time doing different projects that demonstrated creativity. So I did things like, and this wasn't intentional, it was just me having fun really, but things like a clothing company. I did a film magazine called Lost VHS, which got us invited to screenings and all sorts of stuff on the cinema side. I did a bunch of just like random projects and things like that, which I guess, in an email of a 17-year-old showing that I'd done different things and that I had tangible like case studies of projects and stuff that I'd done, I think that probably helped. But predominantly it was that I emailed 20 people and I had, I guess, enough naivety / like, I guess a lack of care, if you will, about how that looked. I emailed 20 people with a decently composed message. I've still got today somewhere, and 2 people got back. So it's the power of numbers. I think that's one of the things that people don't appreciate, is how little people care about you and how little significance you are, that you need to hit a lot more people than you think in order to get a reply, in order to get an interview, in order to get that sort of foot in the door. Like, it takes time and also volume, I think.
Oh, right, brilliant. And sort of leading on from that as well. So from managing the Sidemen, building several brands, including XIX Vodka and Sides, which is obviously completely different industry to the content management. And then also being an investor and advisor to multiple startups. What sort of skills have proved useful in becoming so successful in these roles? And how are you managing all of that as well?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's very sweet, but I think like, yeah, what skills you need. I mean, I think you know what it's again. The one thing that I think about this more and more as time goes on. It's about how much you put out there. It's how much opportunity and how many things come back. So actually, it's a game of inputs. It's a game of consistency and volume. And even in the world of content creation, like I look at the biggest creators out there, people that we know, work with, etc., the Sidemen themselves, and they've uploaded something like 2,500 videos. I think I did a YouTube festival conference the other day, and like they had that stat. It's like 2,500 uploads. It's like that's a lot of uploads. That's a lot of inputs. And when you add up sort of the compound effect of doing more and more things and putting yourself out there more and more and more over time, it builds up into something really amazing. And I think that's the key more than anything in terms of skill set. It's not so much being the most talented at whatever it is. I think it's about actually just applying yourself consistently as much as you can in as many different places that, yes, of course, around your passion and your skill set, but you learn those things over time. Like the bit that you can do from when you're at uni or when you're at school is just get yourself out there and be driven by inputs. And it's the classic thing of 100 questions, one comes back, or 99 rejections and one yes, right? It's that sort of premise. I think for me, as time goes on, I realized just how much more important that bit is, and that's an attitude thing more than it's a skill thing. In terms of the skills for all those different businesses, look, I don't have the skills for those businesses. I have no idea how to run a chicken restaurant or an alcohol brand. I don't know, and I don't particularly care. Like the whole point of the way we've set up our world as management really is to find the best experts in the business and work with them to do the things that we have no idea about. I'm not going to even think or pretend that I know about, the legal regulatory status of chickens I don't know anything about that stuff, and I don't want to know. So I think that's also an interesting principle that's driven everything we do at Arcade is we try and not do the work, so to speak. So we try and find great people, leverage our network, our ability to create relationships with people and trust and sell the vision and then oversee whilst having great operators execute and do what they do best. And I think for me anyway, as a creative who likes to dip into things and doesn't really want to be stuck doing operations or stuff that I find kind of boring, that's way more appealing.
Oh, brilliant. And how have you actually found the way in sort of paving the way for opportunities in sort of management of online creation? Because obviously YouTube has massively taken off, especially in terms of revenue, especially in the last 10 years from what it started as with sort of funny cat videos and that sort of thing. How have you found sort of paving the way in that and not really having too many sort of role models to look up to or lean on for advice in it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, because I think we are in a way on our own doing this stuff because there's no one else of scale, maybe not no one else, but there's very few, maybe you can count on one hand in the world, people you'd want to do the sort of stuff that we're doing with. And obviously our model really was Mr. Beast, and that's a bit of a tricky model these days, maybe. So Jimmy was our model, like, he obviously had Beast Burger, he had obviously his incredible content machine and his factory out in North Carolina. So we had that as a reference, but there wasn't really anybody else building businesses really around talent in the way that we've been able to do it. So yeah, I mean, I think the key is the fundamentals of you have audience, you have partners who are experts, and then you have the bit that you do well or we do well, which I think is the creativity and the actual brand building, positioning, being able to get this stuff out there to an audience and make it resonate beyond the audience as well. And I think, yeah, it's bringing those ingredients together where you never know really. I think that's the other thing as well that I've learned over time is that no one actually knows how things go, or experience can only get you so far. I think it's an experience comes from trying again more things, more inputs, and then learning what works, what doesn't over the course of time. So yeah, I think that's definitely the way that we've been able to pave the way, just by being slightly naive and slightly fearless. It sounds a bit cringe, but like a bit fearless about the way we go about it, where we just say, well, what's the worst that can happen? And as long as you put great things in the world and you're building quality, I don't think people ever have a problem. And even when we have done things and people have said, oh, they're doing another thing, it's like, yeah, but then you have a whole army of people say, yeah, but it's actually really good. And as long as, again, you're driving with quality, it doesn't really matter in my mind. So yeah, that's always been the driving force for us. And as long as you're building great things and you're building it with good people, then I think it generally lands quite well.
Oh, brilliant. So moving on from that, as the manager of your biggest YouTube group, obviously the Sidemen, what does an average day look like managing them for you from the office? And how does it look? How does that change when they're sort of going on the road, maybe going abroad, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, our we're in a unique, the world of YouTubers specifically is a very unique sort of model for management, because, you know, coming out of when I was at YMU, which is a big talent management company, I was CCO there, working with big sort of traditional talent, your Anton Decks of the world, your, you know, I don't know, pick up a Frank Lampard, Holly Willoughby, whoever it might be, take that. It's like the people who are in traditional TV very much are sort of guns for hire, right? So they get a job and then they do the job. They get another job, do another job, whether you're a presenter or you work with brands, whatever it might be. For YouTube creators and specifically the Sidemen, that's not the case. So they are creating constantly, and their flow of production is almost an independent beast in and of itself that is always ongoing, right? So they are very busy filming nonstop, and their time and the I guess the application of their time is all around how many videos can they film, how much can they pack into the time that they're working together. So what that means is, you know, all the way through these last 4 years, our whole approach, and my big belief is that our job is to make that as seamless as possible for them by taking away all of the, I guess, boring business stuff behind the scenes, so that we operate everything and they can just go and make videos. So a day in the life for me isn't really, I don't really have much to do with that side of things at all, if anything, really. What we did do is we brought Victor in, who is our managing director and is incredible. And he came in to run Side Plus initially. And then we said to the guys, look, you guys are too involved in the video still. Like, you're still making thumbnails and your time is being dragged into detail that takes you away from the creative side of the video. So you need somebody who can, you know, manage the editors and the producers and pull it all together. And so we suggested Victor comes and becomes the head of content, and he now operates their entire content operation. So his whole world is very much, you know, the team, the editors, the thumbnail designers, managing the boys, the creative team, working on that flow, managing their whole content business, essentially. And that's something that he does incredibly well. But as management, again, that's not really our remit or role. Like, we don't really have too much to do with that, because that's what the guys do and that's what they've always done. So our world is more around how do you build around and up and around them and also below them. So yes, it's the corporate structure. It's things like, you know, making sure that we are constantly evolving the proposition, the team, making sure people are happy, etc. It's also, of course, working with brands. It's, you know, building, making sure the businesses are running smoothly with the people who are running those businesses, board meetings. It's, you know, I think for me though, again, as time's gone on and I've sort of refined, I think, what works the best over these last few years, it's being way out of the detail and being into more inputs. So it's, how do I meet as many people, speak at as many interesting events? How do I, you know, go to companies and do talks? How do I just get out there? Because more comes from basically, you know, providing more inputs into the industry and into other companies and other people out there, and providing as much value as you can, right? Through that, so much more comes back from that than anything else. And also increasingly for me, like my content, my LinkedIn, my personal brand side of things, again, spending time on that adds way more to the overarching business that we have than probably anything else. It's that, and networking is the most effective use of my time. So that's probably the predominant thing. It's almost like going out there and like, you know, like fishing, if you will. Like, I go out there and catch fish and then bring them back to the team to eat. It's like that kind of principle. And actually, as time goes on, I think that's the most valuable use of my time. So I would never underestimate just how important that kind of input and the networking piece is. I know networking is important, it's a cliche, but it really is. And that's about going out there and meeting as many people as you can. You never know what's going to happen off the back of a meeting. I've learned that so many times now.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all probably very big fans of LinkedIn here as well. But in terms of managing the Sidemen, obviously that's 7 very different personalities, and I'm sure a lot of people in here watch the videos and have seen it. Sometimes there's on-screen conflict. I'm sure there's behind-the-scenes conflict as well. How have you found managing those 7 different personalities and actually making sure that the brand you're building for them is what all of them want?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think that, to be honest, they wouldn't have lasted. We came in, I think, at year 7 or 8. They wouldn't have lasted 8 years if they hadn't worked out how to manage each other, because 8 years is more than most people get, right? So they'd already worked out a lot of their systems, a lot of their own politics, if you will, over that time. Yes, of course, you have the odd thing pop up where you have some tension about time or work, whatever. Like, that is always going to happen in a group of 7. But very rarely does it become anything more than, you know, a little bit of tension or a little complaint or an issue that they then resolve themselves, as any group does. They know how to manage that side of things with each other. And I think the key to all of that is that they hold each other to account really well. Like, they have obviously their system with the yellow cards is very famous amongst the sort of Sidemen fandom, but they have that yellow card system. They have a real solid system of tallying, making sure they're all doing as much. There's no hierarchy within the group. And I think that keeps everybody excuse me, to a level where they are all, you know, able to yeah, make sure that everything's fair, and that fairness carries through into the way that they do business. So, in that side of things, I'd say relatively easy. We rarely have any issues. We've had 4 years. I don't want to mess up anything now, but we've had pretty much 4 years of hardly any dramas, problems, issues between us and them, between them and themselves. Like, it's all managed well. I think where it would have fallen apart, and I really do believe this, before Victor came into that role, I don't think they could have done that much longer, because they were at a point where it was like they were dragged into so much detail that their private lives, their personal lives, their the things they wanted to do couldn't be done because they were just in the weeds of a thumbnail design. I don't know, like random stuff they shouldn't be doing. So I think if he hadn't come in that role, like, would they still be making content today? Maybe, but I think it would have been way more strange because they were just so under it. I mean, I remember they were like, this is a lot. So yeah, thankfully he came in. If it wasn't for that, I don't know where. Maybe I'm sure that they would have probably worked it out. But yeah, I think it was definitely at a strained point before he came in. So that's like one of the most important things. And then yeah, as I say, that they have the Supreme Court, the Sidemen principle. It's like a 4-3 majority rules everything. And so again, they work out their processes. They have that structure, and without that, it would never ever have worked, and it would not be working today.
Oh, brilliant. And sort of another question as well. I'm quite a big fan, and I think there's a lot goes around on the internet about the Sidemen being uncancelable. Why do you think they're so uncancelable? How do they get away with so much compared to other creators? And how have you sort of managed to build that sort of safety for them?
I mean, we have been close. We've been. No, I think. Look, I don't think they're definitely not uncancelable. I think, the difference between YouTubers and creators and everybody else is that their audience hold them to account. So with that comes, I think, a much greater degree of transparency both ways. But also, you're not gonna. I think creators rarely break the expectation of the audience, or if they do, they'll know sooner rather than later whether something's over the line, etc. So I think for the guys, look, they've always tried to push the humor and the comedy. Obviously, sometimes that's gone wrong. Obviously, we had that incident with JJ. It was like a long time ago now, maybe a year and a half ago, which was as close as it got to being disturbed, obviously, by kind of bad decisions in the content, and that was also a problem in terms of process. Ironically, having an international team caused that problem, because having an international team that didn't understand the nuances that's different in one country in terms of what's offensive and what's not okay compared to another country. We have editors in Germany and Sweden, etc. So we had to clean all of that up in terms of training and policy. So it was a really helpful thing in that regard to actually tightening the ship. And I think that's how you have to look at them, as almost like a natural market correction that then helps you to build a stronger foundation, right? Which is what I think we were able to do after that. But yeah, I mean, look, I think the YouTube audience, Gen Z, like our generation, are a lot more a lot more open in terms of what they find funny and like content that's maybe a bit edgier. Sometimes that crosses the line, but I think it makes for a more enjoyable entertainment experience on YouTube, which is why partly YouTube has always been so popular, because it has always been a lot more raw, a lot more funny, and a lot more edgy. So the Sidemen want to keep doing that and being themselves, which is ultimately what that content and that humor comes from, whilst also being totally cognizant of where that line is. And I think as they've gone older as well, like that, they understand that line intrinsically. They really do get it. So yeah, they're definitely not uncancelable for sure. Our role is just to build the right structures, put the right people in place, and make sure that the culture behind the scenes is tight with people who are good. Ultimately, that's like what we love to do, is just work with good people who have good values. And then that carries through into the different parts of the business and ultimately into the content as well.
Brilliant. And sort of moving on, but staying on the same lines, but moving away from the Sidemen, how do you think cancel culture has affected online creation, and how much people can sort of be free with their creativity now?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're probably in a period now, I'd say, where the concept of being cancelled isn't really what it was, and this is in relation to the Sidemen. I think it depends also the game you play, right? So like you have some creators out there who are very much about edgy, like raw humor content, topic, subject matter, which if you are trying to play a mainstream game is never going to work. If you're trying to work with brands, it's never going to fly. But they can still have very successful businesses over here making content that is quite raw, edgy, funny, whatever it might be, to audiences you want that, right? But you're going to be limited in how you can make money and how you can build a business. If you don't care about who's paying your bills, right? If you can make money through your own monetization, if you've got a streaming audience and you've got ads around your streams, whatever it might be, right? If your business model suits edgy content, you can completely build a brand that is totally, would be totally cancelled in the mainstream world, but it's not the game you're playing, right? So think of somebody like, I don't know, Sneeko in America, right? Or, Aiden Ross, good example. Eurpoes, they don't care because they have their own direct monetization. Aiden Ross has this huge kick deal you know, they don't care about being cancelled because they're not trying to play that game. And that is freeing in one sense, because you can say and do things and be a certain way that isn't gonna confine yourself or constrict yourself to, you know, I guess the mainstream status quo. But on the other hand, it means you can't work with brands, you can't necessarily work with institutions in the way that you might want to. So it's all about the game you're playing, right? Do you want to be on TV? Do you want to be in that shiny world of institutional entertainment? If you do, you have to play the game that is about towing the line, right? And making sure that you are holding maybe back on some of the things you would say and would not say. So I think in terms of how it's changed crazy, it's basically boxed people into the game they're trying to play. And it means that everyone has their own line, and wherever that line is defines to an extent the opportunities that you'll have.
Oh, brilliant. And that's brilliant. And sort of looking back over your career and what you have achieved, what advice do you think you would give to your younger self if you could?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think the advice I would give to my younger self would be to start making content earlier for myself, start building a personal brand, because honestly, audience today is leverage. Have an audience. You all have time at uni a little bit, maybe some more than others. I don't know. But build for yourself, like create your own accounts, like find your voice online and start working out, especially today, like now is like a golden age of growth across everything. Like you can really build accounts pretty quickly and you can do some amazing things, but that's going to be the leverage that will carry through to the rest of your life. Don't be afraid to just post and make stuff, because everyone has a phone, everyone has access to these platforms. There's a total meritocracy of content now. And if you're not taking advantage of that, you're missing out. So yeah, that'd be the one thing I would say, start building that personal brand sooner rather than later. The other, and also learn how to be a good content creator yourself, which takes time, but also, you know, it is about actually just being terrible to begin with and then getting good through practice and learning what works and what doesn't. So that'd be the first thing is that I'd say to myself. And the other thing really is to bring people with you. So it was a bit of advice that Mary, who was my former CEO, and before that my MD at YMU, who hired me into that business as a 19-year-old to be their new CCO or whatever, right? So she was she was a bit like crazy in that sense to bring someone like me at that age in. But it was something that she believed in. It worked well, I think, for them. But one thing she said to me was that, like, when I came in, and now I think about it, I'm like, I must have looked like the biggest idiot. I was like 19, 20 years old, walking into this business that was like, you know, however many years established, super old school, very, very kind of established elite talent management company. And I'm coming in as this 19-year-old thinking I had to like flex on people a little bit, or not flex, but be that guy, right? And assert myself and almost justify my role, and imposter syndrome and all those things, right? And so she said to me in an appraisal, she was like, oh, I think basically you're kind of rubbing people up the wrong way, or some people up the wrong way, and you're sort of coming across a bit arrogant, and you're not really like, you're not being humble enough, basically. You're being a cocky little kid. Anyway, like, it was the best thing that ever happened to me hearing that. And it hurt a little bit, but I realized that she was probably like totally right. And the reason why was because I felt like I had to justify myself. And she said specifically to me, as a way to, I guess, overcome that, was just bring people with you. Because I was coming in as somebody from new media into the slightly old school world, trying to drag people and trying to push everything forward. And she said, just bring people with you. And what that means is really slow down and spend as much time thinking about how you're going to bring people on the journey than you are just steamrolling ahead. And I think that's really good advice, and something that definitely, if I was going back to when I was at Vice or wherever, something that I would absolutely have loved to have maybe known or deep. You don't have to prove yourself through steamrolling. You can prove yourself through actually bringing others with you. And actually, that's the biggest value in a company that you can have, is sharing your knowledge and taking people on the journey.
Oh, brilliant. I think that's such a valuable piece of advice as well. In terms of responsibility, obviously for creators, there's a lot of discourse around how responsible are creators for what their audience is accessing and who their audience is. Obviously, we have age restrictions on social media platforms, but it's pretty easy to lie about the day you were born. How do you find balancing your responsibility and what is being put out there on your own, in terms of your own brand, the brands that you're managing? How do you think content creators, how responsible do you think they are for that? What do you think they can do to sort of combat more of that negative images that are obviously being put out quite a lot?
Yeah. I mean, I think, we're in an age of controversy and people wanting to stand out, in an age of attention, right? People need to do, or feel that they need to do crazy and crazier things to stand out, and that can lead to some incredibly reckless things, right? And obviously, Kick as a platform, love them or hate them, they've become a bit of a hotbed for that, because it's a very open platform that now attracts creators who are trying to do as reckless a thing as they can. And it's not always Kick's fault, right? Like, they ban a lot of these people but it's still a culture there a little bit in terms of the kind of output of raw content. And how do creators try and stand out? They do crazy and crazier things. And I think, yeah, creators have a responsibility to have morality within what they do, as much as they can, right? Like as much as is true to themselves, but ultimately in an ideal world, they would just have good values come through what they do, right? And I think, yeah, look, the reality is people are flawed, people do bad things, and people have often immorality versus morality, especially if they're in a world of trying to inflame and create attention around the things that they're doing and they're showing. So yeah, I think although we're in a world where it's unlikely that the majority of creators will take that responsibility, I think they absolutely do have a responsibility to show good values and to contribute positively. Obviously, all this like Bonnie Blue stuff recently, right? That's just going crazy everywhere. It's a prime example of that. And I don't think she's going to take any responsibility for what she does. But, you know, that's, for me, sick, twisted behavior that shouldn't be anywhere on social. Is that something that we as a society will have any impact on? Of course, of course not. Like we as a culture still engage with it, and as a result of engaging with that content, and as a result of like, you know, even the Metro doing an interview and it becoming viral on TikTok now, for example, she's now going to gain tons of more subscribers than she would have if she wasn't so heinous and for me disgusting in the stuff she's talking about. So you see how the culture flames the controversy, and flames the sensational content, and causes the effect that they intended at the beginning. So yeah, look, I think it's just the way it is. But should creators have responsibility? Of course they should. Will they? Probably not.
Okay, that's brilliant. And sort of final question before we take it to the floor for questions from the audience. What are your predictions for what's next in the online world? Are we going to be looking at more short form content like TikTok, or do you think YouTube's really sort of back on the rise with that again?
Yeah, I mean, I think that maybe because I've just spent a lot of time with YouTube as a company recently, I've become maybe indoctrinated into some of the numbers there. That I just see YouTube as becoming, well, still it always has been, and I think it will continue to be the platform for for creators, excuse me, to build on, but also the one platform that really pays anybody. And because of that function of paying, excuse me, YouTube is going to continue to be the number one incentive platform for creators generally, right? So I think that's only going to increase. If you look what they're doing with the TV app, so TV on YouTube is becoming a massive thing. So people watching YouTube on big screens, people have been doing it for a long time, some people, but it's becoming a much more mainstream trend. What that means is obviously the opportunity to almost create formats and shows. You know, they're redesigning their app so it looks more like Netflix, right? So it's going to be more, you know, thumbnails that are like covers to like you would see on a Netflix show or whatever, right? So for some people like the Sidemen, amazing, like that's incredible, because you can put things into series and formats and almost treat it as if, you know, you're watching box sets of your favorite YouTuber. And that's really exciting. So I think that's going to increase. I think, look, TikTok is becoming increasingly saturated because it's the lowest barrier to entry. I think Instagram is going to continue to actually be one of the most interesting platforms in terms of both discovery, but also conversion and growth of a business. And actually Instagram, I'm seeing increasingly is almost the place you want to be, because the way they've shifted their algorithm through Reels now means you can grow rapidly if you have a solid strategy of consistent Reels and you're doing what most people don't, which is the consistency bit. So I would say Instagram is still going to be the place, obviously, for kind of growth and conversion. TikTok, I think, is going to be increasingly less important in terms of, you know, really, I guess, conversion and building businesses and whatnot. I think good for awareness, but actually it's harder than ever. And it's so about the individual videos, so about the discovery, rather than it is about the connection, that I just think it will be obviously attract massive volume, but will it convert into connections and creators coming through that platform? Like I kind of doubt it, maybe. I think I'll also see an increase in smaller communities monetizing directly. And I think this is where monetization in the industry is going to go. It's going to move towards smaller communities, you know, paid memberships that are much more around specific niches than they are around general entertainment. Because I think that's where you're going to see more conversion as a creator, is on the smaller, more niche community around the thing that you are the best at, or you provide your audience in terms of value. So yeah, that's kind of where I see things. I think it's going to basically move more and more to YouTube for the more premium long form end. Of course, I think shorts will continue to blow up and do really well for people. But I do think because everything's so much more transient, the videos going, you know, constricting in length, the volume of content that we see, the speed of trends changing means that it's harder than ever to build connection. And so because of that, people are going to have to be more creative in the way that they actually focus on community and on a specific niche or a specific area that they actually have a voice in. I also do think the formats are going to increasingly become important. And I've been saying this for a long time. Even when we were at Lab Bible, we're trying to do this more and more. But formats over a longer period of time are definitely the creative key, I think, for really building something massive. If I think Cybermen Sunday is a format loosely, Chicken Shop Date is a format loosely, or format quite strongly. You know, you look at even on Instagram, a lot of the biggest Reels creators have formats that are returnable and repeatable. I think that's the way you build long term and build that connection, is by having something that repeats. The generalist creator, the generalist sort of content strategy, I don't think it's going to work.
Okay, brilliant. Well, hopefully the future's looking bright. I think we're going to go to the audience now and see if there are any questions.
Hi, Jordan. At a time when the algorithm is ever more dominant in people's considerations for making content, I was wondering how you balance thinking about the algorithm and like original, bold, and creative decisions.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the algorithm on YouTube especially has changed so much and is shifting all the time. I think it does pose issues for bolder creativity, unless, especially when you're at a scale where people expect a certain thing, so you have to be willing to take those risks. I think for the Sidemen specifically, you know, what we did with Inside and what the team did with Inside was an amazing opportunity to try something bigger and bolder and a bit different. But it did annoyed half the audience at the beginning. And I don't know if anybody was watching that show at the start, but the chat was like full of people saying, "What is this? Like, where's Cybermen Sunday?" etc. And I think that is going to happen when you build that consistent audience over so long, who are used to the type of content that you're doing week on week. But I think you have to break out. And I think as long as you break out with quality and you really dig into making something that is from the heart, if you will, with its boldness, but also with experimentation, and you build quality products regardless of how and when, then I think it can work, especially if you've worked through some of those fundamentals that should always be there. And fundamentally on YouTube, regardless of the algorithm and the changes, the fundamental thing is, are people clicking and are people staying, right? It's click through and average view duration are the two biggest and most important stats on YouTube. And ultimately all that means is, are people staying for your videos, right? And so therefore you creating entertainment that's good. And that's like way easier said than done, because like average view duration is really important, but how do you actually keep people? And that's the actual question, is how do you implement that? But as long as you remember to make great quality content, and you focus on the actual product, then it's possible to be bold, I think, even with that as the constraint, because that's the primary constraint. Like, people can go on about the algorithm, and there can be a lot of complaints about the algorithm in the industry, but in reality, it's just about, are people clicking, are they staying? So, you know, that's why you find some content that you wouldn't expect that does really well, that just has a really intriguing thumbnail. It might be intriguing because of the way the person looks or what they're doing, whatever it might be, and it's not overly optimized, but it still works well. The other thing as well that YouTube are doing is they're doing more stuff for to kind of, I guess, bring newer accounts to the fore, and I think that's a really great thing, where more videos that have like zero, like new pages, even new accounts, can still go on people's discovery, and actually people can find that for themselves in a few pages, so on. So I think that's also becoming really it's a great move forward for them, and allows for more bold ideas to come through. But again, ultimately, are people clicking and are they staying? That's your challenge. So try and see where you can go with that,
Excellent stuff. Thank you, Jordan, mate, for joining us. We really appreciate it. I just want to ask you, naturally, as KSI is arguably the largest of the Sidemen, regarding his association with controversial figures like Logan Paul and Mr. Beast, with the recent Sphere allegations tallied against them, how does that make you feel, both personally and from a professional standpoint? Do you worry about how that will affect the business for the Sidemen, both content-wise and product-wise? And if so, how will you tackle that if it is a problem?
It's great. That's a fun question. That's a really good one. I think firstly, what do I think about it? I think that I'll be obviously relatively careful in what I say, because I don't represent JJ individually, right? So of course, like, he's a part of the Sidemen, but he's also individually KSI in his whole individual world. So I think it kind of goes back in my mind to the point of responsibility in relation to creators, and them taking responsibility for their teams and their corporate structures, and there are clear problems in various ways, and we've seen, especially with Jimmy's operation and his team, there's been tons of stuff that's kind of been alleged, but also stuff that he's had to investigate himself, and he's also kind of acknowledged some of that stuff. So that clearly isn't good. And like, some of these teams really, and it goes for the UK as well, right? Like, we're not totally clean here as a country in terms of some of this stuff, where just corporate structures operations just aren't set up in the way that they should be. Like, thankfully, I think in Arcade, one thing that we've been able to do is my two co-founders are accountants, right? Sam is literally like the YouTuber accountant, and he has been for the last 10 years. So the business that we've always set up has been very tight in terms of structure, compliance and all those things. And that's helped to build that structure around the guys, right, who don't come from the world of business. The other thing that people don't understand, like a lot of creators haven't come from the world of corporation and structure, and which is why, again, they need people in their team to do that. And they also need to relinquish more of that over, I think, to people who know how to build those things. And whether or not that was done in, Jimmy's organization, I think from his own investigation, didn't seem like that had happened. It kind of carried the culture from when they were very scrappy at the beginning into then this massive operation. And then it's like, okay, well, how do we manage this? But also, how do we behave ourselves and do things in the right way? So I think, in terms of how I think it impacts the Sidemen, I don't think it really does. I think the way that the dynamic works between JJ, KSI, and the Sidemen is that, the Sidemen are the boys, if you will, and JJ always comes back to that group, and he has a role in that group, as they all do, that's totally equal. But then he has his own world that's over there doing, all the things that he does incredibly well. So regardless of those associations, the products, the things that he does, I don't think that has an impact really on the group, because the group is bigger than him in that sense, right? There's the 7 of them, and although he has an incredible individual profile, when they're the 7 of them, they're the 7 of them. And I think that's always how it has been. I think that's always how it will be. There isn't really correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think from the outside looking in, there's a gradation that within the Sidemen, there's a hierarchy of sorts. I think they all have that kind of level playing field, which also helps to protect the business, where regardless of what any of them individually might do, the group is sort of stronger than the individuals, if that makes sense.
Hey, Jordan. On the subject of KSI, I'm sure you're aware he recently released a song called Thick of It.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Obviously, the song has received a lot of criticism from the public. I wanted to get your thoughts on the song and about the criticism that it's received.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question again. I think for me, honestly, I think it was a perfect storm, right? So he had the lunchly stuff, the dance stuff, and then the song, and it all coalesced into this opportunity where obviously people were sort of hating on him for the dance stuff, and then that led to hatred of the song as criticism after the dance stuff that was like way more, I think, than it would have been if it had dropped a year ago. I think anyone would have really criticized it personally if it come out without that storm. But because the meme machine went into overdrive after the dance stuff, because people were kind of obviously hating and didn't like the way he responded to him, it led to this sort of catalyst, if you will, for all of the criticism that then followed. But then obviously that criticism turned into immense publicity, and now it's like number 6 or something in the charts, I think, in the UK, and it's on the Billboard chart in America, which is crazy. Which is like huge. So I think, look, my opinion on the songs, I really don't think it's I don't think it's nowhere near as bad, if like that bad at all. I think if it had come out a year and a half ago, I think anyone would have really trolled it. It just hit the meme catalyst machine that then took off into whatever it is. So I think it's been overblown, but that's the joke, right? That's the fun of social, is like everything, of course, gets overblown into becoming these big memes. Then everyone sort of goes in on. So I think in that sense, like that's genuinely how I think about how I feel about the song. I just think it's like the song, right? I don't think it's nowhere near as bad as people are saying, but also, it's not the most incredible song in the world, of course not. But no music is in that sense. So I don't think it is warranted of all the criticisms warranted about it. But it's funny, right? And all the memes and all the stuff that's come out about it have been pretty hilarious. But ultimately, JJ is the one who's now sat with 50 million views in 2 weeks or whatever it is, or 3 weeks on YouTube, and a Billboard charting song and a UK charting song. And it's just the power of social, right? Like, you can create these moments that become these global talking points from the UK. So it's super interesting to watch, obviously. And I just think it's funny. It's just the whole thing's it's funny to see.
Hi, Jordan. Being that you manage one of Europe's biggest content creators, how do you deal with the looming effect of cancel culture and the fact that it could take place any moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think we talked about this slightly earlier in terms of how I see it. I mean, I think in terms of, you never know what someone's going to do or say in life, right? So you can only protect yourself so much. When I was working at YMU, we had Ant on deck, and Ant crashed his car, and whenever it was at Christmas, drink driving and caused this big scandal. Like, you never know. And at that time, obviously, Ant on deck was a massive portion of James Grant's income. And that's terrifying. That's cancel culture to an extent. You do a bad thing, you get lambasted about it publicly, and then what happens next? You lose your brand deals, etc., and you have to deal with it in the right way. So I think as long as you're mitigating your risk by building in structures, having checks and balances for things internally, making sure that everybody is aware of where that line is. And yes, especially in comedy and in entertainment, that line gets pushed sometimes, but it's how do you constantly keep it in mind at every point of the business. I think that's really important, and making sure that things like the JJ thing that happened before, that doesn't happen again, because no one, that was like the most busy and intense and long week of my life. Like it was awfully busy and stressful. No one likes that. No one enjoyed that, right? But it was a good experience to work out, okay, how do you actually work through something like that? And I think, again, that's the other part of this is you always say, look, if something does happen for whatever reason, I don't know, a tweet from 2007 gets dragged up. I don't know, like maybe not when they were 10, but you know what I mean? Like 2012 gets dragged up or something. What do you do? And I think it's now that we've gone through that, we have processes to manage it, both internally and also with our team, right? Which is really helpful. So yeah, I mean, I think the looming effect of cancel culture is I think less important than it was a few years ago, but I also think people are more self-aware than they were, and self-awareness with some leads to create, like, they are self-aware that they're doing crazy, ridiculous things that people are going to hate, like the Bonnie Blue example, or like I saw on Kick the other day, some people doing some drag race and were literally running people over, and that was like streamed on Kick. So some people are self-aware in that, but also people are self-aware as to where that line is. And I think as long as you're aware of that and you know where you stand and where your boundaries are, I think you're as fine as you can be. Although you never know what someone's going to say, but as long as you do all those things, you're probably okay.
Hi, Jordan. So obviously, as the Sidemen's manager, you're going to work on quite a few things. In your personal opinion, what's the toughest thing you've ever worked on and had to manage as over the last few years with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. The toughest thing, I mean, look, I think the JJ incident was not easy, man. That was not fun because we had, we were about to do a big collaboration between sides in a big supermarket. That fell through. We had a bunch of other brand things that had to get paused because of the hype around it all. We had to obviously work out apologies and statements, and we had to make sure that, the content team were kind of protected and in place, and it was all managed correctly on that front. We had to, that was one of the most intense and challenging things, because every step is watched, it matters in the narrative that you're then, of course, trying to build to show that you are holding yourself to account, to show that you're changing internally when an incident like that happens. So that was definitely difficult. Like no two ways about it. That was hard to manage. I think also, sides at the beginning was not easy. I spoke about this bit when I did the Colin Smear episode, but sides was not easy to manage at the beginning because we were like, I think we totally underestimated the infrastructure of Deliveroo in relation to the traffic that the Sidemen can demand, right? And we knew that traffic, but then when you put that into 400 square feet ghost kitchens, it's a recipe for disaster. Pardon the pun, but it's a recipe for disaster. You're asking for problems, and we had people there like queuing up 5 hours on delivery waiting for food, and just couldn't get it because we ran out of chicken, ran out of drivers, or delivery ran out of drivers. We couldn't fulfill it. So that was stressful. And then when we started building up the estate of ghost kitchens, I'm so glad we got rid of them. Like, terrible idea. But when we built up the estate of ghost kitchens, the quality control, like you had some random. Remember, we had one ghost kitchen in like, where was it? Maybe Liverpool. Maybe it's. I don't want to say, but it's like, I wouldn't be surprised. Where like the person in the shop was like using our chicken, our fresh, nice tenders for their own stuff, and we're putting like frozen tenders in our delivery, and we're basically stealing our product to like sell themselves and disguise as their product. And then they were using our packaging for their own stuff, and they were using like random chicken boxes for our stuff. It's like, what the heck is going on? We had some crazy stuff. Like I've never seen anything like it. When you're just sort of distributing the quality control out at that scale, is really hard to manage. So that was tough. And obviously, every day the boys, also the problem with social media, in one sense, it's not really the problem, it's a great thing, but the challenge on one sense is that most businesses, their complaints aren't public. So we'd see, and obviously the Sidemen, is the owners of the business, are not getting DM'd typically with photos or things that are going wrong with the food. So we were getting that constantly when you got to that scale of 100 stores. And that was also difficult because the boys are like, what's going on? Like, why is there this thing? Or, why are there regular chips? Or why is this person been served whatever it might have been from, yeah, and it's just the nature of the beast. So those are probably the two I'd say. The JJ incident, of course, was difficult, but glad we got through it and we worked through it in a way that I think landed well. And then sides, as that scaled up to that point of like real scale, was also difficult for sure.
Thank you for being here today and taking the time out of your schedule. It's kind of sort of like a two-part question bundled into one. How easy and what kind of things do you need to do to be able to like work as a career in YouTube?
That's a good question. Yeah. So what do you need to do to have a career in YouTube? I think it's finding a technical skill to begin with that enables you to actually add value to the content itself. I think that's the first thing. So editing is probably the best skill that you can have today, because the actual film production side is increasingly democratized, as in you can film on your phone, right? Like anyone has access to film, but the editing process, motion graphics, like those things go a long way. So I would actually say editing is probably the best skill set that you can have to kind of get your foot in the door in a career in YouTube, for sure. I'd also say making content yourself and learning and really staying up to date as to how YouTube is building and how the algorithms are changing and what does good content look like. And you can only really know how to be a creator by being one. You can only really know, I think, how to help and work with creators if you are one yourself, even at a small level. So I think that's really important. And then the other bit is you're building a personal brand, like going out there, talking about the things that you're interested in the space, your thoughts on the space, the points of value that you can add to the space, inputs, and be really focused. A story recently, we actually hired somebody called Callum, who is 22. He spent 6 months trying to get our attention at Arcade, but mine specifically on Twitter. And he basically created a whole Twitter account just to try and get a job with us. And on that account, he put, he made these great case studies, these threads as to, things that the sidemen should be doing, or ideas for the ways the brands could develop, or content formats and ideas. And he present them in these great threads. And he was so consistent at all of us. And he just did it relentlessly for 6 months. And I probably didn't even maybe notice him until 3 or 4 months in. And he just kept going and kept going and kept going. And Josh in the sidemen messaged me and he sent me one of the things he did. He was like, "Oh, have you seen this? It's pretty good." And I was like, "Oh, sweet. Maybe it actually is pretty good." It was a thing he did around XIX brews, this concept of XIX beer, right? Which you wouldn't do for numerous reasons, but it doesn't matter. It looked great and he put the effort in to make it. So then after that, I was like, all right, yeah, cool. Maybe he's a little bit weird because he's like spent how many months badgering us, but I'll meet him and see. And met him, nicest, most chill, smart, switched on guy at 22. I was like, all right, cool. Yeah, great. We'll give him a task. We'll sort of meet a couple of people, and then softly. And now we've hired him, I think about 2 weeks ago, and he's incredible. He's absolutely amazing. And all of the skill sets that he's now deploying were in that 6 months of just trying to get our attention, being creative on Twitter, coming up with great formats, great ideas for us. And I think for me, he's the prime example of how to get a career in YouTube. And he said to his parents, he said to me recently, he's like, I said to my parents, this is the one company I want to go for. I just want to go for them. And I'm going to spend all my energy to get on their radar and get their attention. So I think that's really key. It's just having that focus, having tangible skills that you can demonstrate, and just being relentless, because you're not important. No one is. So no one is important for someone's life, especially when they're busy. So you just have to keep going with great quality inputs and as much of them as you can. And you will end up on someone's radar. You will end up in the place you want to be if you are consistent in doing that, I think.
Oh, well, that's absolutely brilliant. I think that's all the questions, and that's enough from me as well. So,
ladies and gentlemen, Jordan Schwarzenberger.